Howdy ho, Maplers. Bet you weren't expecting to see this character, were you? We're back on the very first 250, the Shadower. Thanks to Maplehood Watch, we have the P-Socks available to us to move all of my gear over and make this video finally possible. We've been doing Arcane Force dailies with no gear, no Arcane Force for a little under 2 months now in prep for this video. It's finally coming to fruition. We're back on the Shadower. Now, in an effort to make this video as close to normal as possible, I have unequipped a few pieces of gear since I didn't move over my drop set, so my stat is a little bit different, but I tried to make it as similar as possible to the other thieves in my videos. So, for the gear, normally this would just be the 2-line, or this would just be the mace or drop gear, but for the video, we moved over the stuff that was already in my storage, so most of it is just stat gear. A lot of this stuff has been sitting in my storage for over 2 years. Who would have thought it'd come out of the storage for the Shadower video? Definitely not me, but we're putting it to good use. This is pretty much just the regular thief set that I always use, just moved it over for the sake of the video. All of it's pretty darn good. The emblem and the shield are both fairly decent for my 250 since my original plan when moving over to Bera was just to main Shadower since it's a class I'd never played before and just play Bera casually. We all know how that ended up. And here we are, 23 250s already. The Shadower main dream is long gone and dead. But for the B Matrix, as always, in its rightful place, in that first spot, its decent holy symbol. You knew it was going to be there. Then for the boost nodes, Shadower really only has 6 skills that you need to boost. You got Sudden Raid, Boomerang Stab, Shadow Veil, Dark Flare, Assassinate, and Meso Explosion. Pretty much just get 2 trios that cover these and you're good to go. There are some Shadower players who will say that Savage Blow is the skill you need to boost. I am in the camp of, nah, not really. Really, there aren't that many maps where Savage Blow is better than Boomerang Stab, or where you just can't make a rotation using Boomerang Stab. The only advantage Savage Blow has over Boomerang Stab is a slightly larger vertical hitbox, but for the most part that vertical hitbox really doesn't matter, and you do not have enough good skills remaining after boosting these 6 to make another trio. It's incredibly wasteful, and pretty much all of these skills that you're boosting already are very much necessary and very good to have, so I wouldn't really swap any of them out for Savage Blow, but there are a few rotations that use Savage Blow. Thankfully, they're lower level areas, so you don't really need to boost it in my opinion. It's more of a luxury than it is a necessity. For your first skill, we've got Trick Blade. It's a very, very, very nice mobbing skill on a pretty low cooldown. Only downside to it, it doesn't really have any upward range to it. It's like Reflection for Luminous, but way, way worse. This thing will bounce down pretty much the entire length of a map, but it won't go up at all effectively. For bossing, this is a very good skill, as it is your iframe, as well as a repositioning skill. When you have 3 little skull marks over a boss from using Assassinate, you can proc this skill on the slam part of Assassinate and it will teleport you no matter the distance behind the mob that has those marks, and it'll do a ton of damage and give you an iframe for a short period of time. Feels really, really good to use, and it leads to a lot of cool looking bossing for Shadower. I've had this thing take me from the entire left side of Magnus's arena all the way back to the right side behind him. It has very, very good range to it for that warp. As well, it's a low cooldown iframe. It just comes with the caveat you need to have the 3 stacks and you need to proc it after the slam portion of Assassinate in order for it to teleport you behind the mob. But you can get used to that pretty easily. For the second skill, you've got Shadow Assault. This is effectively your mobility skill more so than it is like a bossing or mobbing skill. This is the skill that allows me to pretty much never use Rope Lift on a Shadower, because between this and the double flash jump, as well as the mob teleport that you have down here on your 6 key, you pretty much don't need Rope Lift for just about anything. Like, it makes Spirit Savior a little easier, but generally you're not using it for Spirit Savior either. This skill has very good range to it. It's a huge, huge dash, and it does quite a bit of damage, so it's good for mobbing as well. 10 out of 10 skill. For your third skill, you've got your quote-unquote burst skill. You've got Sonic Blow. Now this skill isn't a ton of upfront burst, but it has the cooldown decrease for each body count you use. So every time you're getting the second slam of Assassinate with 3 stacks of body count, this cooldown is getting reduced by 1.5 seconds. So while you're bossing, you're reducing this cooldown constantly every time you're getting the body counts off of your Assassinate. So this has a lot of uptime over the course of a boss fight, where it doesn't have a lot of upfront burst. This adds a lot of damage to your bossing in total. So it's a very, very nice skill to use. And then your final skill, your fourth V, the Slash Shadow Formation. This skill is almost as good of a mobbing skill as it is a bossing skill. It can pretty much single-handedly clear maps, which feels amazing. It's a little bit too fast of an animation for its own good, where if you're on Kishin spawn, there is a few instances where the animation will finish and it'll give you the final big slash and there will be no mobs left for it to hit. That feels kinda bad. However, with Frenzied Spawn, this thing just feels amazing all the time. Pretty much none of the attacks ever miss, and it's insane at mobbing. It can pretty much cover the whole map by itself. For bossing, it's a lot of additional damage. This is much more of like an upfront burst skill than Sonic Blow. But again, it has a low cooldown. Pretty much everything about Shadower is low cooldowns, high impact. Like nothing is going to be as huge burst as like Spread Throw, but it's going to be a lot of damage over the course of the fight. Then, of course, True Arachnid Reflection. You get this for completing the Will storyline. It's decent mobbing, decent bossing damage. Slap it on whenever you get a slot. It's pretty handy to have. As well, decent Sharp Eyes and decent Speed Infusion. These are the two standard decent skills for pretty much most classes. Besides decent Holy Symbol, you want it for the crit rate and the crit damage, as well as the attack speed if you're using green pots to hit attack speed 0. Then you've got Shadow Walker and Last Resort. These are pretty much just your bossing burst skills. You just slap them both on before you bind, and then you go ham. They give tons and tons of damage, and they're super nice. As well, Shadow Walkers, since this is a Shadower, you have Advanced Dark Sight, which gives you bonus damage while being in Dark Sight, and while this is active, you are constantly in Dark Sight. So it feels really nice to use. Bonus damage on top of bonus damage. And then for this last slot, I have Urda Nova since I'm effectively done training. I have been done training for the last 2.5 years on this character, so I don't really have a character building skill, but I'd always have character building if I were training. Probably just slot it in before any of these two skills, since you don't really need these just for bursting elites while you're training. Character building, definitely good to have. And then, if you don't need decent Holy Symbol for your bossing, just swap it out for Maple Goddess's Blessing. Even more burst on top of burst. Feels good to use. Now for training as a Shadower, when I trained this class to 250 originally, Meso Bomb pretty much didn't work at all. It was dealing magic damage instead of physical damage, so it was very, very unlikely that it would help your mobbing with how little damage it was putting out. So I had to do a lot of map testing in order to get a feel for how this class functions with Meso Bomb, and just how good Meso Bomb actually ended up being. But for 200 to 205, I'm really not a fan of any of the VJ maps. They don't feel amazing. So I would recommend just rock it out in Fez 2, or any of the future Perion maps, whichever one you're most comfortable with. They feel really nice, and with Meso Bomb, they definitely are really nice as long as you're 1 or 2 shotting. For the top here, just drop your flare, and then along the bottom, you'll just jump, and you'll use your Boomerang Stab and Meso Bomb. Pretty much just always together. Unfortunately, you can't macro Meso Bomb together with Boomerang Stab, because you can't activate Meso Bomb unless there are Mesos on the ground. Kinda dumb. I wish there was a way you could lock like Meso Bomb so that it would always proc, kinda like a Shadow or a Night Lord's Mark rather. But with it being an active skill only, you have more control over when it goes off, so you can always guarantee it's hitting mobs. And as long as it's 1 or 2 shotting, you'll pretty much be full clearing, and this is really, really good EXP. Now, just a little tip, I know everyone's key bindings are different, but this is just something for like your wrists mainly. I would recommend keeping Flip a Coin, your main mobbing skill, be that Boomerang Stab or Savage Blow, and Meso Explosion, in a line together, so you can just go 1, 2, 3, and then boom. You get your buff, you get your mobbing, and then once you have 5 stacks of Flip a Coin, you're just doing 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. This will save your wrists in the long run. Don't put these keys far away from each other. It's important for your hand health, so I would recommend keeping them close together. And then for 205 until 210, or until 215, because honestly, I'm not a huge fan of Chuchu Island. As well, these reverse city maps are very, very good. T-Boy's Research Train number 1. You want your Shadow Flare up here on top, because you're not really ever going up there, and then you'll just Meso Bomb and Savage Blow here along the bottom. And since this isn't the hidden Research Train map, you don't need very much funding to actually come here, or to start 1 or 2 shotting with Meso Bomb. So it's definitely a nice map for weaker players. You can go to the hidden Research Train. I'm not a huge fan of the map because it's a lot of jagged platforms. You definitely start to notice the lack of vertical range on your boomerang stab. But for here, it's pretty much the best map in Reverse City because it's so flexible. Any class with a flash jump can train here. And by golly, Shadower's a class with a flash jump. Doesn't take too much funding, and this map is good all the way till 215. For 215 until 220, or until 225, whichever you decide. Of course, it's the hidden Illard Field. Who didn't see this coming? This map is overpowered. It's so good. It's incredible. I've stayed here on some classes until as late as like 2:30, looking at you, Oran. But for your summons, just place them up top. Lucid Soul on one side, Dark Flare on the other. And then for the most part, you're just using the same rotation. Flash jumping through with your boomerang stab, following up with Meso Bomb, and Meso Bomb will pretty much take care of any of those things in the middle that aren't being cleared. Then when Shadow Veil's on cooldown, you can just drop it here in the middle, and you are pretty much full map clearing. Between your summons and Shadow Veil, this pretty much covers the entirety of the map. It's very, very nice. As well, once Shadow Veil's off, you can flex in your new skill, just jump around here in the middle so that you're always tagging the top, and then boom, even more full map clearing. Oh man, Shadower is so much better at mobbing than when I trained it to 250 originally. I feel like I missed out on how good this class actually is. It still has the main problem for me where it's a lot of cooldown watching for the best rates, but it does feel a whole heck of a lot better now that Meso Bomb actually works, right? And then for 220 until 225, or you can just stay in Hidden Illard Field if you don't like Latchlin, you got Rev Place 3, also a very good alternative. It's pretty much the standard Latchlin rotation. Lucid Soul goes on the house. If Lucid Soul isn't fully covering, you can also just drop Shadow Veil. That'll definitely cover it. And then up here in the top right, you just drop your Shadow Flare. And you just flash jump and use Boomerang Stab and Meso Bomb. And by golly, full map clear again. Who saw this coming? As well, when Shadow Veil's off cooldown, you can always just use Sudden Raid on the house. Holy Leg Spike. And that'll take care of any of the stragglers because you need to be clearing the house as much as you can, because if you're not, mobs will start clumping up on this left side and it'll take spawn from the rest of the map. Feels really bad. That's pretty much the idea behind always having Lucid on the house. She stops that from happening the best she can. And this is a really good map to train in until 225. Or heck, until 230 if you want to stay here. Because much like Night Lord, I would highly recommend staying where your Meso Bomb is 1 or 2 shotting. Because more often than not, where your 1 or 2 shotting is going to get you the best kill rates. And generally having the best kill rates also means the best EXP rates, unless there's like a huge level gap for the mobs. It's very much so in the same vein as Night Lord, where when your Meso Bomb is one-shotting, your Shadower is probably the best farmer in the game. When your Meso Bomb is 2-shotting, it's still really good, but it's not as good as some classes. And then once you start adding on more hits, like 3, 4 hits with Meso Bomb, Shadower keeps going lower and lower down the totem pole of good mobbers. Meso Explosion is definitely a huge part of Shadower's mobbing rotation, so make sure you're training in places where you're doing the least amount of hits with Meso Explosion to kill the mobs. That'll probably get you the best EXP rates. And that's pretty much how I got all of my best rates while testing maps. Where Meso Bomb was doing 1 or 2 hits, it was really, really solid. Pretty much everywhere you could go, Meso Bomb did its job, and it was great. Where it wasn't 1 or 2 shotting, the rates definitely suffered. And then for your first map here in Arcana, because we got 2 of them this time, you've got LP1. Pretty much just set your Dark Flare and your Lucid Soul on one side. If you're 235 already, Set your will skill on the same side as Lucid, because Lucid's definitely going to need all the help she can get. She's not the greatest at mobbing if she's not one-shotting. She only hits 7 mobs, and she attacks kind of slowly. And then it's just the same combo. Boomerang Stab, Meso Explosion, and you're pretty much clearing the whole darn map. It feels really nice. This map is definitely reliant on your Meso Explosion, since you're really never getting up to that top platform. So you want to ensure that you're 1 or 2 shotting with your Meso Explosion so that you're clearing as efficiently as possible. That's pretty much the rotation. You can drop Shadow Flare here in the middle, all your summons are up, and you're full map clearing without having to lift a finger. As well, you can use your new skill here and then just flash jump back and forth in the middle, and that'll pretty much clear everything. It's really, really good. Nice compact map. Shadower can hit pretty much everything in here with its skill set. Feels really good. And then the second map, the place where I trained until 250, we got Side Path. The first time this is showing up in one of these 250 videos. Because this map is actually really nice for Shadower. Your summons go on the top. Lucid Soul and Will skill on one side, and then Dark Flare on the other, because Dark Flare does a ton of damage. It's a very, very good mobbing skill. Once you have the boost node at level 20, it gains 1 extra mob hit, and it just starts carrying the ever-living heck out of you. As well, this is a map where you want to be watching your cooldowns, because when Shadow Flare or Shadow Veil is off cooldown, you want to drop it on a side. That skill can pretty much handle an entire half of the map by itself. And then you'll just stand over here underneath your flare, and you'll be killing these mobs over here. And by golly, full map clear. And then once Shadow Veil ends, you'll just be flash jumping along the bottom, proccing Meso Bomb, using your Boomerang Stab in unison. Pretty much your main mobbing combo for Shadower, and you'll pretty much be clearing the whole darn map. It feels really nice, you get a lot of kills per hour, but there isn't much downtime in this map. It's a lot of cooldown watching, because you need to make sure all your summons are up as much as possible, but this is where I was getting the best kill rates. Pretty much none of these rotations for Shadower are going to be the most relaxing thing in the universe, but they're all good rates, which is, I guess, the trade-off. Shadower is by far one of the least relaxing mobbers there is, but on the trade-off, Shadower is one of the best mobbers there are. And you could stay there until 250. That's where I trained until 250 when I was on Shadower, because I was a very weak boy, and Meso Bomb didn't really work, so Esphera was completely out of the option, but now we got Esphera and Sellas, so I did a bunch of testing in these maps as well. And for Esphera, the map that I landed on for being the best rates-wise is MTS3. This map feels really nice. You can drop your flare on this middle platform here, that'll take care of the top and the one below it. And then over here, you just want to drop your Lucid here on the top, because she's really not going to be doing all that much here. She's just barely 4-shotting, I believe. So you want to set her where she can do the least amount of mobbing possible, but still actually contribute. And then you want to be jumping along the bottom, using your Boomerang Stab, popping your Meso Explosion every time you can. And since you're flash jumping pretty much the entire distance of the map, you're never running into the issue where pickpocketed Mesos are in an area where you're not. So you're pretty much always guaranteed to get off Meso Explosion procs. And this is, by golly, really, really good rates. Then once you have Shadow Veil on cooldown, you can just cast it in the air like that. It'll take care of the entire right side, and then you'll just focus on clearing this. It feels really nice. The only problem with this map, there's not like a really good loot cycle. You kind of just have to do it while you're mobbing, but since Shadower has so many mobbing tools at its disposal, it can get away with doing that. So you can get around and loot while you're still killing. It's pretty nice. It feels very good. And MTS3 is probably one of the better maps in Esphera, to be honest. It has really good spawn, has a nice layout for a lot of classes, and it just overall feels really good. But if we're looking for solely EXP, Esphera is not the best bet anymore. We've got Sellas at our disposal. Now, I tested a lot of these maps. When I equipped all of my gear, not the stuff that I'm using for just the video purposes and whatnot, but when I equipped like all of my lunk gear, I was able to train in the whale maps. And they didn't feel that bad. SSS1 is very, very good, but it is very, very popular. So I would recommend PD4. This is the other map that I tested out. PD1 is very good, but it is slightly worse than PD4. If PD4 fills up, PD1 is the direct trade-off, right? This is probably one of the more simple rotations for Shadower, since all you're doing is going portal to portal. You'll set your Dark Flare, and then you'll jump down and you'll set your Lucid Soul. And you'll let the summons take care of that side, and then you go from portal to portal, jump down, use boomerang stab, proc Meso Bomb every chance you get, and your Meso Bomb will go over to the mobs on the right where your summons are, and they'll pick up some stragglers. When you have Shadow Veil on cooldown, you can literally just set it on this platform here. That'll take care of the entire half of the map up there, and then you can just flash jump along the bottom, clearing it out nice and easy. Once Shadow Veil ends, you'll swap in for your new 4th V, and you'll just stand on this platform. And from this platform, it can pretty much hit everything on the map. None of its attacks are going to miss mobs, and by golly, it's really nice for mobbing. And then once those are on cooldown, you just go back to drop downing, proccing Meso Bomb every chance you can, and it's really, really simple and pretty darn nice. This was getting about the same EXP rates as Esphera, but it was much simpler, which is why it's a map I would recommend to people. Because simplicity is best, right? Especially with a class as complex and interactive as Shadower. It's hard to find simple rotations that actually give you good rates. Thankfully, the Sellas came through with PD4 and gave us a nice simple one. But that's pretty much the mobbing. Shadower is no slouch in the mobbing department. It's probably one of the best mobbers in the game, but again, it's not the most relaxing mobber. It's a lot of cooldown watching, because those cooldowns are very important to your mobbing power. As well, you can also flex in Urda Shower. I did use this a lot when I was training to 250 originally. It's not as necessary anymore thanks to Meso Bomb actually working now. But it is still a nice skill to have in. Let's say if you don't have a Lucid Soul, flex in Urda Shower and throw it on your space key so you have another mobbing skill to take care of areas that Lucid would normally cover. Works out really nice. I like Urda Shower a lot. Now for Shadower's bossing. Alright, oh boy. Shadower is a really good bosser now. They made Meso Explosion client-sided in one of the recent updates, and by God, it feels so good. When I was training Shadower to 250 originally, the only way to effectively Meso Bomb weave in between Assassinate was to use sticky keys. And I absolutely hate sticky keys. It's one of the worst mechanics in this game, but unfortunately it's something that's just gonna stick around forever, apparently. Thankfully though, the Shadower is no longer a class that requires sticky keys. You can now pretty easily weave Assassinate into Meso Bomb consistently, and that means, because Meso Bomb now procs up body count, your second hit, the slam portion of Assassinate, is always going to get the bonus damage for your body count, and you're always going to get 3 stacks for the 1.5 seconds off of your Sonic Blow. It feels incredible. It's really, really nice. It ensures that you're doing as much damage as often as possible, and you're keeping your skills in flow very, very nicely. Before, there was a lot of lag on Meso Bomb. It was really awful to weave, to the point not weaving at all was better for me for DPS, but thankfully Meso Bomb is now client-sided. We now have the option to make use of Shadower's whole kit, which is incredible. As well, Shadower for bossing has like a lot of mini things to keep track of. You've got your smoke screen, which is really nice for bossing. While you're in the smoke screen, attacking while in Dark Sight will not drop Dark Sight at all. So pretty much you can drop your smoke screen, go into Dark Sight, and gain damage the entire time that's up. Same thing with Shadow Veil. When you're in Shadow Veil, attacking will not drop Dark Sight, so you can stay in Dark Sight the entire time, tons and tons of damage. As well, you've got Shadow Walker for the same thing, stay in Dark Sight, more damage. There's a lot of little things to keep track of. But once you get it down, Shadower feels really nice. As well, you've got Trick Blade again. This is effectively a mob teleport from pretty much infinite range as long as you have 3 stacks on the boss. It'll get you right behind the mob, give you an iframe, do a whole heck of a lot of damage, and it feels really smooth. It's very nice for bosses like Vellum. You can just teleport to it when it goes for its breath. You don't even have to worry about where it's at. It's just like, oh no, Vellum's taking a deep breath. Assassinate, assassinate, teleport behind Vellum, and you're safe. It feels really, really cool to use. It's a very, very fun skill. Then again, for your main burst combo, you've got Sonic Blow, and you've got your Slash Shadow formation. These two together do a lot of damage, but they don't do insane burst damage. It's because they have the lower cooldowns. They're up more often, so in long boss fights, they're doing a lot of work, but in like the short one bind fights, they're not doing as much work as some skills. So it feels kind of weird. it's weird to call Shadower a consistent DPS class, but that is sort of more what it leans to. It's not as burst heavy as some actual burst bossers, but it does have okay burst for those situations as well. Mainly because Shadow Walker Last Resort, your Maple Goddess, they just like inflate your range so hard. You can make up for your lack of upfront burst with your skills by adding on burst from your buffs. So Shadower is definitely no slouch. I would honestly play Shadower up with almost Dual Blade in terms of fun bossing at this point. The only downside I have to Shadower's bossing is that when you're weaving, there are instances where there is input lag still. I don't know if it's just the animations are kind of long that it feels occasionally clunky, but you don't always have that instant reaction time to start moving when you're doing assassinate meso bomb, assassinate meso bomb, assassinate meso bomb. You can't always like get out of the way instantly unless you have your Shadow Assaulter up to just force yourself to teleport dash effectively out of the way of some skills. But I guess that's like one of the minor drawbacks to the class that you just have to get used to while you're bossing. And again, I've only really been bossing with Shadower here for about a week now in preparation for this video, so there might be things that I'm doing wrong that I'll just get used to as I play it more. Thankfully, in our community, we have an amazing Shadower main who streams quite regularly, Dubsley. He's probably the best Shadower we've got. Watching him bosses is a complete treat. Seeing what Shadower can actually do in the hands of a Shadower main is something else. If you're interested in him, I'll leave a link to his Twitch in the description down below. I highly recommend it. He's a good guy, makes good content, and he plays the Shadower. One of the most underrated classes, honestly. Shadower has flown under the radar in GMS for far too long, in my opinion. It's very, very, very good at mobbing. But again, it's not easy. And I guess in GMS the meta is just pick the easiest mobber ever, right? The Shadower has the potential to be one of the greatest Meso farmers in the game because it has a Meso passive that goes over the Meso cap. So it has most Meso obtain of any class in the game just by nature of being able to go over the cap by itself. But it's very, very rare to ever see an actual Shadower farming because of how much effort it actually does take to get those best rates, which is kind of a shame. But thankfully now that Meso Bomb is fully working, there has been a resurgence for Shadower players, especially now that it's client-sided. It doesn't feel nearly as clunky. I've seen quite a bit more Shadowers than I did when I was originally trading this to 250 because, oh boy, back when I was trading this to 250 2.5 years ago, it was pretty much me and like maybe 2 other people on the Shadower dojo every week. There were very, very few Shadowers out there. So it's good to see this class is finally getting a resurgence of players that it sort of deserves, right? Oh, it's kind of weird getting back to this class after 2.5 years. This was my first 250 in Bera. Was originally supposed to be my main, right? This is my first foray into Bera from Reboot. Transitioned over to play this casually. Probably wouldn't have stuck around Bera for too long, but managed to run into some very wonderful people who made my time early on in this server very enjoyable. This kept me here about as long as it took to get a Frenzy Totem. And then from there, it's just all history, right? We were able to farm as much as we wanted when we wanted. We got that Reboot feel in Bera. Couldn't have done it without the help of those guys early on. Tiffy, Jackie, and Andrew, carrying me through my early woes in Bera, helping me out with boss carries, giving me frenzy casts, talking with me and supporting me through the early game for Bera. Definitely couldn't have done it without them. None of this would have happened without them. Like, any of these videos pretty much stemmed from them keeping me in Bera for that early game, because starting out in reg servers is a lot rougher than people give it credit for. Yeah, you do have access to the auction house, you can get gear early, but the early mid-game progression wall is absolutely insane for reg servers. Like, getting your gear isn't the hard part like it is for Reboot. Actually improving your gear is a whole beast entirely. Spell tracing, starring, cubing, it's a very, very high peak to get yourself over. And it was pretty rough. It was pretty rough starting out this character in Bera. So I'm thankful to them for helping me get through this so that we could get to all these different classes so that I could experience everything this game has to offer and just share the insights with you guys. I'm glad I moved to Bera. I'm glad I chose Shadower as my first 250, right? It's a class I'd really never played past 200. I had never even touched Shadower with the intention of maining it until I moved to Bera. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I gave it that chance. It was a lot of fun learning a class as I went, because a lot of the time in this game I've played for 16 years. What I'm playing is something I've played years and years. It's not often that I hop onto a class that I've almost honestly never touched. And Shadower was a good experience. I enjoyed it overall. I would recommend it to pretty much anyone interested in it. Its theme is very, very good. All of its skills are very pretty. Its bossing is good. Its mobbing is good. Everything about Shadower is good. It's just not terribly popular. Hopefully this video changes some people's minds, right? Hopefully people look at this and are like, hey, that class is pretty darn cool, and they give Shadower a shot. That's what these videos are for. Like to show people the pros and cons of classes. Hopefully give them inspiration to main a class they normally wouldn't think about. I'd love to see more Shadowers. The game definitely deserves more of these. But that's effectively it for Shadower. If you have any questions about Shadower, about Bera, about my grind for all classes 250, or just about playing MapleStory in general, as always, ask them down below. I make it a point in these videos to answer any and all questions you guys have, whether you find this video today, 10 weeks from now, 10 years from now. I like to help in any way I can. I've played the game for 16 years. I know a few things. I don't know everything, though. If I don't have the answers, I'll point you in the right direction. And until next time, I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you next time.